Okay. So today what we will discuss is the summary of the method that we had discussed last time. So we discussed two methods to get the optimized value of theta, that is the parameters of the line, and the two methods that we discussed was gradient descent and normal equations. So just to give a contrast between the two, like what are the advantages and disadvantages between the two, I have listed down here. So as you can rightly see, in gradient descent, there is a requirement of alpha. Alpha parameter is the learning rate parameter. So we require that parameter to get to the ideal value of theta, to the optimized value of theta of the equation of the line. Whereas in case of normal equation, there is no requirement of alpha as such, and you will directly get the optimized value of theta by using the equation that we derived last time. So as you can see from there is no alpha, and hence there is no problem in setting up of that thing over here. The second important thing is in gradient descent you need iterations to get to the value of theta, that is the optimized value of theta. Whereas in case of normal equations there is no iteration required. So iterations are not there in normal equation. You just plug into the values of the matrices that we got to derive last time, and you just put that values and you will get the result. The third important thing which comes, which gives you a upper hand over the normal equation is this line. That is, the gradient descents actually work better if the features are large. So if your features are large, then gradient descent will work better, and that gives the upper edge over the normal equation. That is the upper edge. So it is slow. This particular thing is slow if features are large. So it's a problem here. So that is the main takeaway from the last methods that we discussed last time. So today we will go a bit further into this linear regression and see what else we can study apart from the normal way of fitting the line onto the data. So the second important thing that I want to discuss here is this thing. And what is this? This is actually showing you it's posing you a question, and the question that it is posing is that is there any drawback with this cost function? So we discussed this cost function a lot of time now. So you must be comfortable with every element of it. So can anybody tell me is there any drawback for this particular cost function? Any one of you?
Sir, when I try to use this cost function to code my gradient descent,
Mhm.
what happened was it highly dependent on what I took the first initial two theta values, and it would stuck. Like after many iterations, it would not fit the scatter plot, and then it would like just stuck in get stuck in some weight position, which and then after which it would not move from that position.
I think
Like
that should not happen. Maybe your alpha, the learning rate parameter that you are using, is very small, and because of that it's taking too much time to get to the final value. And if your number of iterations,
so
maybe the
but
number.
then what I did was I initialized both theta with 0, 0, and then it was fine. But when I picked random thetas, then sometimes it would get stuck.
I think the chances are very less because it's a convex thing, and it has a one global minima. So I think maybe some problem in your code, you have to check it out. But there is a very rare chance that this type of thing will happen with this simple type of thing. You know, it's not a cost function which gets you stuck into some local minima, because there is no local minima at all here, as we have checked also. It's a convex function having one global minima. So it's very difficult, I don't feel that that type of problem should come, because this is a very simple type of cost function that we are using. And I think you have to check your codes for this again. So any other apart from this doubt, if can anybody tell me what are the drawbacks for this particular cost function? Anyone? Okay, so the drawback I will tell you, if you see here like this, if this situation comes like the one which I am showing you over here, and in this situation what you are observing is you have one sample which is given over here. This sample is actually far away from the most of the samples that are scattered around in this area. So if you see here, most of the samples are scattered around here, but you have one extra sample which is this one. So it might be the case that this sample is a outlier. This sample is a outlier. It might be the case. By saying outlier means it's not there in the data, and it's maybe it is error. It maybe somebody has made error in recording this particular point. So if this is the situation when you have an extra element, when you have an outlier which is completely different from the data sets plot which is given over here, then what will happen is, you have seen this thing in the case of this particular thing. In the case of this particular thing, what you are doing is you are actually calculating the difference between the predicted minus the actual observation. So the problem here is the predicted value for this particular sample is this, but the actual one is this. So it calculates the difference of the error in between the two, and the difference in the error is so large. The difference in the error is so large that it will derive this line. It will drive this line. It will derive this line to this position like this. Or to be precise, I think I'm not drawing it perfectly, but it will make this line look like this now, like this. And why it happened? Because it happened because of this outlier which is over here. This outlier actually creates such a heavy error that it forces this line which was actually fitting earlier properly to this line. So your line is moved like this. So this means the problem is your this line is actually prone to outliers. Prone to outliers. So whenever any outlier is there, this line will get deviated and it will change its position. It will come like this. So it's a very serious situation because you are trying to fit this, and if you go to the real data, somebody would have made a mistake, and if that data is completely off from the normal distribution of the data, then the line will change its position. So how to avoid this situation is changing the cost function. So if you take only the absolute error between the two, the one which you are predicting and the actual one, if you actually take the absolute error of this difference instead of the squared version, then some sort of mitigation can be possible. And this the advantage of using this particular thing, which is this is the absolute value. Here we are actually treating negative as well as the positive errors equally, but do not exaggerate the importance of large errors. So once you do not square this, then actually the large errors will not be amplified. So both the errors which are due to the outlier or because of this distribution that you have here, all these errors will be equally contributed. So we can change this cost function to this function also, and we call this type of cost function as least absolute deviation cost, and you do not square it, and you keep it like this just to have a just to avoid this outlier situation. So if you try to do a comparison between a least square fit and absolute deviation, if you can run this exercise yourself also, that if you have an outlier somewhere here, you can create this outlier yourself also by putting some extraneous element into the data set. You can put any extraneous data set, and once you put that data set, but once you put that element here, then what you observe is that your line, the white line, is actually the deviated line which happened because of the L2 loss, and because we are using L2 loss and due to this outlier. So your line changed. Whereas if you see the green line is the L1 loss, or the mean, or this one, the one which I am discussing here, the least absolute deviation. Sometimes it is also called as L1 loss, because you are taking absolute value of a quantity, so it's also called as L1. That's why I wrote L1 there. So it's a least absolute deviation plot, which is the green one, and you can see it is not affected by this outlier at all, because it is treating this difference not square but without a square. And in the cost function, if you want to plot this as a cost function, then you can see how this cost function looks like when you have a when you compare the two cost functions for this particular two regression plots. So the cost function value in case of least square is higher than the cost function in case of least absolute deviation. It is less compared to that, compared to this one. So this is the advantage of using least absolute deviation compared to the um this thing using the least square. So any doubts here? Anyone having any doubts? Okay. So
Uh,
yeah,
Sir, this will also change the equation of the uh, weight, the equation where we manipulated the weights, right? So
yeah,
that equation would
yeah,
also
yeah,
change.
that will also change. Yeah, it will change because your cost function is changed, so the derivation related to that will also change. And even you have to take care of the differentiation, because the absolute value is not differentiable at zero, so you have to take care of that also. So it involves various some changes in the mathematical equations to get to these values. You cannot reuse directly the weights that we have derived earlier, because the weights that we have derived earlier, the equations that we got, the normal equation, the update equation, is all related to the L2 loss. That is the squared loss that we were using, not for this particular. So for this, you have to derive yourself the weights and the optimized weights for the lines. Then only it will work. Any other question? Okay. So if they are not there, then let's discuss one more type of regression, which we call as weighted regression. So here we have another type of regression. This is weighted regression. Here what we do is sometimes we also call it as dealing with duplicates. So let us say, you have some data like this which is given over here, and you can see that you are plotting for. So what this experiment is all about is, it's an experiment where there is a ramp like this, and what you do is you roll a ball actually, and you are calculating the time that it takes this ball to reach to this point. So you are actually calculating the time, and you are doing some experimental study to measure the gravity, something like that. So some experiment is there where you are rolling the ball and calculating the time it reaches to the end of this point. So what you observe here, the observation that you will find here is, and the important thing that we do during this measurement is that we are actually rounding off the values. So if you have something like 2.345, then if you are rounding it to 1, then you can take it as 2.3, something like that. So some rounding is happening either to two place or one place, that I am not aware of, but there is some rounding that is happening. So if that rounding happens, if that type of rounding happens, then obviously you will all agree that there may be a situation where you have two values, but because of rounding, it will become 1. So suppose you have 2.3, let us say 2, and if you round it, it will also give you 2.3. Earlier was also 2.3. So there are two samples which are having same value of 2.3 because of the rounding operation. So this rounding creates multiple duplicates of the data set. So you have 2.3, 2.3. So I don't know how many of them will be there, but we have plotted it over here, and you can see the thickness. The more thickness of this data set is, the more duplicates are there in this particular point. So as you can see here, this particular thing has a large number of, it's more round, and it is wider compared to the other data set. So this has large number of similar data accumulated at this point. So this is actually the data set where you have large number of duplicates. So, as as somebody was telling that, how the weights will change or not if we are changing the cost function. Yes, you are right. The weights will be changed, and even in this case also, since this application is different. Please note, when you are working in any practical problem, I am trying to show you here that the linear regression is same, but as the problem changes, like in your company when you will work, it will not be always the same simple setting where you will apply linear regression, but you will get some challenging data, and what you have in your hand is linear regression, and you will try to see how you can fit that linear regression to the change in the data behavior. So here you can see there is another challenge, how to fit this data, how to come up with a line which can fit this data effectively, and you have duplicates also. So for that there is no formula available, there is no formula available that you can put here. If you put that type of formula here, it will not work because you have some different data set. So how to change your loss function, how to change your cost function as per the data is the challenge, is the engineering solution that you have to provide to the company if they pose to you this type of problems. So if they ask you to solve it through linear regression, then you have to go back to the basics of linear regression and again try to solve this problem using the basics. So how will you do that? So let us say you have this equation, you already know this equation, this thing you already know here. So what you observe is that if you expand this summation, which is given here, it is given over here, right? So I am showing you through this purple highlight line just to show you that this sigma is expanded. It is expanded depending upon how many similar terms are there. So let us say this particular term, this one, the first term that I am discussing here, only x1 are there, x1 samples are there. These x1 samples are same till beta terms. So if beta 1 term samples are there, like, there are beta 1 samples of x1. So it's like, some circle, a round circle, and the value of this is beta 1 because there are beta 1 samples of x1 here. So what we are doing, we are summing these all samples of beta 1 terms. And similarly, if x2 are like, if they are like beta 2, then you can collect these x2 terms together in this summation. And then you go for XM sample and see if there are, multiple XM samples, and if you found that that value will be beta m. So you can see there is a pattern that is emerging from here. The pattern is that for each sample you are actually collecting, a set of these similar samples together and group them into different terms. So here first one is beta 1, second is beta 2, and if you reach the XM sample, it will be beta m. So when you generalize this thing to, if you write this series in a proper way, then the modified loss function, see, this is the modified loss function. So the modified loss function will become like this. It's very easy to, generalize this. So you will have, beta I factor. This beta of I factor is actually a multiplicity by the times this xi actually happens in this data set. So if xi happens, two times, then it beta I will be 2. And suppose x1 happens 3 times, x2 happens 7 times. So this beta I will change from 3 to 7 depending upon which sample x1 or x2 is 3 times or 7 times respectively. So this is the modified loss function for the weighted average type of thing. And now once you have this loss function, then you do the same uh, uh, derivation that we have done earlier. The only difference is we have this beta I also, and you have to incorporate this beta I, and you will all agree that once you do the derivation that what we have done earlier, then the theta hat, the optimized value of theta hat that we obtained through either gradient descent or through normal equation will have this beta also in that equation. So any questions here regarding this? So the challenge is how to change your equation, how to adjust your fundamental equation to the data set which you are working, or the problem on which you are working. If you keep on using that same equation there, definitely it will not work out. So this is the thing. And one important point here is this this point of view that I have told you for this data set is based on the duplicate thing. Like I am saying, okay, we have multiple duplicates, let's represent it by a bigger box like this, and if you have very less duplicates, then it will be represented by a small dot like this. So so the point of view here is in terms of the duplicates. So let us see another point. Another point of view for this data set can be weighting the points by confidence. Weighting the points by confidence. So what is this? This is basically, let us say if you have a data set, this one, let us say you have a data set x1, let us say, and you have a data set x2, and you have some points here, and you have some points here. So when you create a single data set, let us say x3, this can happen, it can happen on the basis, like if you are working in a oil shipping company, and and if you are getting some data out from two different sites for that oil reservoir company, and you know that the data that you will receive from a site X is having some errors compared to the site X2, because of some error in the instruments that they are using. It can be the calibration error or something like that. So based on that, you have already have a preconception that this particular site, if it gives you some value, that value will have some error, and that error will be less than the error that is incurred because of the site that X2 is giving. So when you try to combine all these two data points together into a single data set x3, because you have to do some analysis, then what you do, you will actually put all these yellow dots here and blue dots here, so it will be combined. But one thing to note here is, along with this blue point, you have to attach the confidence, that how confident you are that this value is right. And along with this yellow line also, you have to attach a confidence to it, that how confident you are for this yellow point. And uh, by your previous experience, or maybe due to some that the confidence of the yellow is more than the confidence of the blue. So that maybe because of some study, or somebody would have told you because of their experience that they had in the industry. So if that confidence is there, so that also falls, this type of application also falls into this particular type of regression, which is weighted regression. And by saying confidence means now that your beta 1, the confidence, because we are scaling the values of x1 by beta 1, so we are actually these are actually confidence terms now, beta 1 to beta m. So they are acting as a confidence. So let us say your x1 is having, x1 is more reliable than x2. Then what you do is you increase the value of beta on x1 more as compared to the value on x2. So basically beta 1 will be more than beta 2. So you multiply x1 by a value of scalar value of beta 1, which is greater than beta 2, because your reliability of x1 is more as compared to x2. So when you multiply beta 1 with x1 and beta 2 with x2, this again falls in the in this particular setting, which is weighted regression setting. So you immediately realize, okay, you got this problem, and when you tried to solve this, then again it fall into the weighted regression setting. So this shows you an important thing. The important thing is we discussed simple regression and how we changed it to weighted regression based on two different practical applications. So first application is which we already discussed here, this one, which we had, in which duplicates were there, and in the second application what we have is confidence building. Like if the point is having coming from a reliable source, then we will increase that to, we will multiply it with the confidence that we have. So again it falls into that same category. So this shows you a simulation uh, thing over here. So what I have done, what I have have here is, like, we have a data set. You can see this data set and keep observing this point. So as you increase the confidence of this point, like as you try to increase the confidence of this point to this, as you increase the size of the data will increase. Here the size of the data is increased, here the size of the data is increased further. So as the size of this data is increasing means you are actually multiplying this value with beta 1 here. So beta 1 will be less than beta 2, and this beta 3 will be more than beta 2, and beta 4 will be it will be like this. So as you keep on increasing the values of beta, the confidence in this point is building up. So the important observation that you see here is, in case of L2, in case of L2 regression, if you use L2 regression, then this actually line will keep on, moving to this point, moving to this point, which is having a high confidence score. I can show you analysis of this here. If you want to see, then if you want to see, then I can show you that. See here, we have this thing. So if I run this, now you can see how, if the confidence in the point, if the confidence in this red point is increasing, how this line is getting closer to the red dot when we are using L2 loss. So as you increase the confidence, the line is getting towards the red dot because of the confidence score. So any questions here? Any
Sir,
one of you?
by
Sir,
confidence,
will after a certain
Sorry?
sir, by confidence, you mean that you are increasing the number of duplicates of
Yes,
control
yes.
point term,
It's
right?
it's it's a it's a another point of view. Actually, it's not you are increasing the duplicates, but yes, some way or the other, it is the same story. But the application is different now. Now you don't feel, you don't think it in terms of, duplicates, but now you think it in terms of the weightage that you are giving to that data set, because it is coming from some reliable site. That is the thing.
okay, sir, after a certain value of beta, will it become the will the line become constant? Like it won't change anymore?
After setting the value of beta, that will be constant. But this simulation is showing you that if I keep on increasing the beta, the behavior is like that.
But after like increasing from a certain point, then it will make no change, right?
Yeah, I think so, because that's because it's already getting close to the. If you see here, it's already getting close enough to the original data, to the confidence point already. So it won't go beyond
Yeah.
that. Yeah,
So once it coincides with the point, then it won't
yeah,
change, right?
yeah. It
Oh,
won't change. Yeah,
got
you can simulate and check also this thing, like the way I have done here, and you can cross verify your intuition. But the thing is, it will be like that. It comes close to the original data, but it has some contributions from other points also, so it has to adjust to all that, so it will be very close. Yeah.
okay, sir.
Any other question? Okay, so if this is not there, then now some part of the linear regression or the variants in the regression are finished. So now we will go to the second part. So see, for every time I will try to introduce you some new concept. I will try to make you understand the motivation regarding doing that. But there may be some situations where it is difficult to do it, and the topic is randomly coming, and we have to do it. But some way or the other, I will try my best to let you know the background picture why we need and why we are doing it. So on that thing, let us start a new topic now. And the topic what we are discussing now today is nonlinear regression. So here you see we have some data set available. So one is on the left side, another one is on the right side. So can you contrast any difference, like as we discussed in our last data set, and what is the difference here compared to the one which we had discussed last time? Any one of you can contrast, like what is the difference?
So here the data is non-linearly dependent on
Yeah.
X.
So the important thing that we observe here is, as the title also is suggesting, it's a non-linear regression. So that means you are trying to do something based on the non-linearity in the data set. Earlier, what we were discussing was simple. The data set was linear, even if it is a multiple feature data set, or you know or a single feature data set that we analyzed. It was all linear, so there was no variation in the data set. But now, as you see here, the data set is not linear and there is some variation in it. So here you can see two important things. So the one important thing that I we observe is that some way or the other, this particular data set on the left is actually, it's the behavior of this particular data set is something like this. Whereas in this particular data set on the right, the behavior is something like this. So can you comment upon the type of features that we should use here so that we can fit this data set properly? Like, can anybody tell me what kind of features?
Polynomial function.
Yes. So
So
yeah,
the first one should be parabola or even x cube,
yeah, something like that. Yeah. And on the second thing,
and the second one is like sin x curve
right,
or
right.
cos x.
Good. So what you observed is, by seeing the data set also, you have to come up with yourself and think about that how you can how you have to come up with the features that will actually fit this data. So that is the challenge of machine learning algorithms. So when you go to advanced topics like neural network and deep learning, which are the more advanced versions of what we are doing in this class, what beauty that they have is, I just wanted to tell you here in a short discussion. What beauty that these architectures have is, they automatically detect this pattern, like what kind of features they actually need to fit this data. Instead of we providing that data to the algorithm, they automatically detects itself that okay, it needs x square or it needs sin x, using an important theorem in neural network or in deep learning, which is universal approximation theorem. So this is a very important theorem in neural network theory, which is universal approximation theorem, which says that if you give neural network any variation in the data set, it will fit it, and it does it by finding the features automatically itself, and not by thinking like us, that we are thinking like, okay, for left side we will use y is equal to x square or x cube, for the right side we will use sin x. Why not cos x? Why not something else? So, depending upon our thinking, or depending upon the functions that we know, that we have knowledge about, we are trying to come up with these features ourselves, and not automatically done through machine. So that is the what you say, the contrasting difference between machine learning algorithms, and once you move to neural network, it changes. And in deep learning, it completely changes. You never do anything in terms of feature design in deep learning or neural network architectures. That is inherently automatic. But if you go to the lower level learning algorithms that we have in machine learning, you have to devise your features yourself, and then you feed it to the problem and see whether that feature is working or not. And the important thing is all these features that you will derive yourself will not work with the other data set. And it's quite evident also because as the data set changes, your features will change. So this is one of the major drawbacks of machine learning algorithms. But because it's a fundamental course in the area of artificial intelligence, so we have to understand this area uh, thing. Though it's a drawback, but it's not that much. It still works. So we are studying it. So this is nonlinear regression, and you see how now your uh, y will be x square here, and here your y will be x1, let the others, and here your y will be sine of x1, because you know this data is moving in a form of sinusoidal format. Okay, so if this is the situation here, so let us try to fit the purple line onto these green dots and see how we can do that. So there are multiple ways of doing it, but we will discuss very simple ways. And the simple way which we will do is we will first motivate that why how we are doing it, and then we will see what are the drawbacks of that approach that we will be discussing today, and what is the solution of that when we go further. So let us take a second example now. So our focus today is this example which is given over here. So this example is some way or the other, uh, similar to the top one, but it's more to the classification setting which we have not done yet. But you can understand what we are trying to do here. I'm not explaining you the classification without going into the details of it, but it's just showing you the boundary that it is creating between the two classes. So we have two classes here. One is plus, another one is minus, and in classification setting, which we will discuss later on, what we are doing is we are actually separating the two classes. We are separating plus from minus. So how will you do that? You will do it by if you are able to come up with the yellow boundary. If you are able to do it, then you can classify the two classes. So let us discuss how we can, how our machine learning model can do this job of creating a non-linear boundary compared to the linear boundary that we were discussing last time. So as you all agree that this is a parabola which is a shifted parabola with axis changed, then the equation of this parabola is this, where 7 I have taken just to adjust the offset that is making from the vertical axis. So this offset I am taking it as 7. You can take it as B, A, C, whatever you want. So this is just to give you an idea that the equation of this boundary is a parabola, and its equation is given like this, where x1 is this feature and x2 is this feature. And the observation that you will find by seeing this thing over here is the observation that is you are finding is that it's quadratic. This thing is quadratic in x1 and x2. So the behavior is quadratic because you have some curvature like this. So any questions here till now? If you have, please let me know.
Sir, at times it won't be possible to plot any like relation. Like it may be random at times. The class, like
Yeah, yeah. It is
then
it,
what
it
will happen?
yeah, yeah, yeah. It will not be exactly the way I have written over here, but some way or the other, you can some way or the other, if you want to solve some problems, you have to approximate it with that, because you know if you see here, though it is a sine, there will be some noise on top of it, but you cannot write that. But anyhow, you have to solve that problem. So the polynomials that you have to use is already which you know. You cannot use the exact exact equation which is actually fitting these data sets. So for example, if your data set is like this, you know if you have something like this, so if you have some outlier this side, though it is like a sine function, we are avoiding this outlier at all. Otherwise the actual function will be something like this, which is actually difficult to get. So because our understanding for the features is limited, because we know some of the mathematical functions and not the exact equation of this line which is fitting this data set, we have to resort with that simplified features. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Okay. So similarly here also, the boundary could have been, something like these, maybe. I don't know. It could have been like this, but we don't know the equation for this particular curve because it's a complex curve which is separating the two classes. But we know that it some way or the other looks like a parabola. So let's replace this actual one. Let's replace this actual curve with the somewhat approximated one which we know by ourselves. We know the knowledge of that curve, so that's why we are writing it by this particular equation. So what we observe is this is quadratic in x1 and x2. So how to learn this boundary is important. So let us see how we can do that. So one of the key ideas in learning this boundary is learning this nonlinear boundary. The key idea is to expand the input representation. This is the key idea in machine learning to learn the non-linear boundaries. So how can you do that? So let us say if your original data, which is a quadratic data, is x1 and x2. We have two features here. You have x1 and x2, and your data is quadratic in this feature space because you are plotting here like x1, x2, and you see that this particular boundary is quadratic. This is quadratic in this particular feature space. So now what you do is you actually transform this data so that you the important thing now note, you have to transform this data so that it becomes linear in the transformed feature space. So now your new feature space, let us say if I consider only quadratic terms. So if quadratic expansion is done on the features, please note why we are doing quadratic expansions, because we see there are some quadratic terms. That's why we are coming up with all the versions of the quadratic terms for x1 and x2. So if we do that, then you can see we have x1, we have x2, we have square of x1, we have square of x2, and then we have x1, x2. So now what we have done, from two dimensions we have moved to 5 dimensions. You can see how the input is expanded. That's why I am writing here expansion of input space, because your input earlier was 2 dimension, but now you expanded it to 5 dimensions. So once you do that, what is the advantage that you are getting in this? You are actually increasing the feature space. So what basically it means is, if your design matrix X had, if you recall our earlier lecture, your design matrix X was having samples here and features here, right? So what you are doing now, earlier in linear regression setting, you had all one this side and some features this side, right? I am not writing the indexing completely, but you can understand what I am doing. But now this is in 2 dimension of linear system of a linear system. So now what you are doing, you are expanding this. You are expanding this to more features. You are taking x1 also. You are taking x1 square, like this. You are expanding the features. So earlier, if features were only 2, now you are expanding in this horizontal direction for this matrix X. So what is the advantage of having this transformation, or you can say expansion of the input representation in this particular feature space? The important advantage is that your boundary, which is quadratic in lower dimension space, that is in 2 dimension, here in R2 space, if your boundary is quadratic, what happens is in 5 dimensions, if you increase it to 5 dimensions, your boundary will become linear. That is one of the important things. Once your boundary becomes linear, then you can use all your concepts of linear regression here in this space, which is the transformed space, because you have understanding of linear regression line, right? So once you have developed the theory about linear regression line, you can apply it in this space, in this high dimensional space, and that is equivalent to the quadratic space if you down project this samples. If you down project this feature space back to R2, then it will be a quadratic boundary. So that is important point to be noted here. In order to solve quadratic boundary, you tried to increase the feature space so that your boundary became linear, and then you know some concepts of linear theory, and then you can apply that thing here, and then you, if you go back to the two-dimensional space, it is again quadratic. So it is some way or the other doing this job. So any questions here related to what I have discussed? Okay. So if there are no questions here, then let us see, as we are saying that if it's a quadratic, it becomes linear. Let us see uh, how it is possible, how it is becoming linear. So as you can see, boundary, our original quadratic function was x1 is equal to x square plus 7. So what I will do is I will shift it to the left side. So if I shift it to the left side, this is 7 here, not 5. So the equation of the original boundary is this. It's very simple. Now what I am claiming, the claim is that it is linear, that this boundary which we have discussed and which we are saying that it's quadratic by seeing the observation here, by seeing this term, now our claim is that it is linear in fx. fx is the fx is the set having, please note this is fx. fx is a set having expansion of the features. So now you are having x1, x2, x1 square, x2 square, x1, x2. So now our claim is it is linear in fx. So if it is linear in fx means you can write it like this. It is same thing, it is same as we were writing earlier, f theta plus, we were writing like this, right? For the model m alpha xi, we were writing it as f theta. If you go back to the lecture, you will find it out. It's the same thing written in some. It's the same thing written in now f, capital F, and this f is now a transformed feature vector, and it's not the same one which is over here. Please note, it's not that same one. It is the transformed feature f. This one, the elements of this f was quadratic feature. The only feature, no, sorry, the elements of this was the simple features that we had, and there was no transformation involved here. But this one is having the transformed feature. So this f is different from this f dot that we had earlier. So now you know this fx has 5 different features which you have expanded. You have expanded to 5 features. So what you can do is, if you want to, you know, write like this fxw plus b, you can immediately realize that if you want to compare it with the, if you want to get the values, and if you want to represent this equation by this equation, so what you are doing is you are writing it as w fx plus b. So the feature vector fx is this, which you already know, but what are the weights w that you attach with fx so that it represents x1 minus x2 square minus 7. How can you do that? You can do it by seeing that x1 is there in this original boundary. So x1 is here also in this feature space. Let's put a value of 1 over here. x2, if you see x2, there is no x2 in this boundary, the original one. So we are putting 0 over here. How about x1 square? There is no x1 square, so we put 0 over here. How about x2 square? Yes, we have one x2 square, and the value of that is minus 1. And how about this b? B is 7 over here, minus 7, so we will write b as minus 7. So once you have this, that is you have assigned weights to this expanded feature, then you can write it as wfx plus b. And what is this equation? This equation is equation of a straight line in featured transformation space, because you have transformed the original features into this higher dimension. So here it is a straight line. It is something like this. Like if you have a two-dimensional space, the boundary is like this, But when you feature transformed, when you transform this into higher dimension, let me try to sketch it. So it will be x1, let us say here x2 is there, then you have x3, then you have x4, then you have x5, where x5 is x1, x2 to be precise. This one is x2 square, this is x1 square. So if this is the five-dimensional feature space, then what happens is this blue boundary looks like a straight line. And if you down project, then it will again become this boundary. Any questions here regarding whatever I have discussed, because it's a very important thing to understand. So if you have any questions, let me know. Any students, if you have any questions, any doubts, let me know. Are you able to understand what I am teaching here?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
okay. So if you are able to understand this, then we can go further now and see. So this is the first thing. Like if you want to do nonlinear regression, you have to come up with additional features along with the original one, which is given over here, as you can see here. So this will help you out in fitting the nonlinear boundary. So this is the intuition or the mathematics behind what's going on. But the nonlinear regression is very simple. You use the x square terms, x1, x2 terms, x1, x3 terms, sin x, but some way or the other at the background this is happening. So let us see something more. So as you know, this is the original mathematical formulation of the model which we had earlier discussed. So this is a simple linear regression boundary where we had all the terms which are linear over here. You can see these are all linear polylinear things, x1, x2, xn. These are the linear features, and we represented it by using this model which we discussed in our last lecture also. But now the modification that you are doing is you are actually transforming each of these feature vectors which are given over here by applying a function, let us say f, on all these features separately. So if you are applying the function, and these f can be different also, as you can see, the first f in this particular case, the first f is simple unity. There is no f1 actually operated on this. In this also there is no f1. Here what you are doing, you are actually putting a function which actually squares the x1. Here it is squaring, here it is cross multiplying. So all these f1, f2, f3 are different. So that's why I am writing it different over here. So what you do is you just replace theta 0, theta 1, f1, theta 2, f2, f3, fn, and you are operating on the features that you are feeding into this function to get the complex features out. So this is the representation when you address the non-linear relationship fitting in non-linear regression setting. And note, I have kept phi here. This phi is not visible here, but this phi is the internal weights of these polynomials that you have. Let us say if your polynomial f is sine vx plus v2, v1x plus v2. Let us say you have something like this. You are actually multiplying with a constant v1 and adding v2. So this v1 and v2 are actually clubbed together into phi. That is what I am writing over here. They are the internal weights. These are the external weights. These theta 0, theta 2, theta 1, theta 3, all these are external weights which you are actually tuning, which you are actually training through in linear regression to get the best fit line. But there are internal weights also which are within the polynomial sin x, let us say for this example, and it depends on you whether you want to tune these v1 and v2 also. If you want to tune these v1 and v2 also, then this phi will actually appear here. And what you have to do now, in order to tune these v1 and v2, you have to take the derivative of the loss with respect to v1 as well as with respect to v2 also, if you want to do that type of exercise also. But if you do not want to do that, that's okay. Then you will have only these as the tunable parameters. But if you tune V1 and V2, then your sine function will also change according to the setting. So this is some very detailed insights. We are not considering this type of situation. We are considering only sine of x plus something, some constant. But if you want to do it as an exercise, you can do yourself also. Okay. So once you have this model which we have written over here, it's very simple to see. You can write something like the one which we have already discussed for regression setting. We create a design matrix which is given over here, and the dimension of this design matrix is m cross n. So this is very similar to the linear regression that we have done. The only difference is you are operating polynomials now f1, f2 on the features which are x1, x1 till x1 here. So this is actually basically feature transformation setting, and this is also called as now featured design matrix. Earlier we were calling it as design matrix, but now it is a featured design matrix because you have these transformations applied on these input samples. That is why we are calling it as feature design matrix. So again, you can now understand everything is similar to what we did last time. So we will create a this matrix which with a top symbol with a dot over here. We append one, and now you know one why we are using one. This is the theta which you are actually tuning, and then you have m theta. This is not phi. This is like this. And please note, we are not we are treating this weights as constant right now. If for you, if you want, you can exercise with variation in the phi also as discussed. But for us, I am treating phi as constant. So this is f theta. This is the model. Very simple. Everything is what we discussed in our last class. So in our earlier,
Excuse me, sir.
yes,
So because of this side, the feature design matrix won't change, but the cost function derivative of cost function will only change.
see, the derivative of the cost function will change because this f is coming now. I will show you that. It's coming in the next slides. So everything is there. Don't worry about it. The
Okay.
cost function that you are talking about will change and its equation will change, and I will show you that also how it is changing and what are the values. Okay?
So, but the feature design matrix won't change even if we would like to tune the extra parameter, then
Yeah.
this
That one is internal.
side. Yeah.
That one is internal, yes. It will not change.
Okay.
But you have four equations now. The four equations will be one is with these, one is with the variation in, rather
Yes,
you
sir.
can say you can have two equations where you have the
Theta
derivative with
and V.
theta and then you will have with phi also. This one.
Yes.
Okay, so let me, show you what are these values of f dot and f, which is given over here in the example that we had studied earlier, which is this one. This one. If you keep this in mind, I want to show you how you can fit this into the f and f dot. So it's very simple. Your f dot will be 1 x1 x2 x1 square this is the space. And right now if you are considering only one sample, it's like this. If you consider m samples, your f dot will become like this. You can see it. So it's like you have the dimension will be m because right now your samples are running from 1 to m now, and since you have expanded your feature space from 2 to 6, that's why it is m cross 6. Here it is 1 cross 6. So this is a typical representation of the example that we had studied. So now the important point is, if you have understood everything here, then one thing to observe is your current data is in two dimensions. We were discussing, right? Our current data was in two dimensions. We had x1 and x2. So we had these two dimensions, and what we did is we projected it into six dimensions by expanding the feature space from x1 x2 to x1 x2 and all that extra terms that we studied. Now, the important question that arises is, if your original data which is here, which is right now in 2 dimension and we expanded it to 6, if your original data itself is in n dimension like this, then what will happen? Can you tell me what will happen? If you have original data itself in n dimension, earlier it was in 2 dimension, it was a very small dimension, but now if your original data itself is in n dimension, what will happen? Any answers to this?
Sir, if it's a one dimension, then there are two feature variables. If there are two, then we have five.
Hmm.
So if there are three, then we can calculate some
Yeah.
kind of.
Yeah, you are close to that, but I am trying to show you the disadvantage of this approach actually, the one which we are discussing, the expansion thing, the feature expansion thing, and you are close to it, so let us discuss that. So if you have a new feature space where you have n dimensional space feature vector, which we are discussing right now here, this case, this case has n feature space. So if you have this, and if you are and if you are transforming this space, feature space, to this capital F here, this is capital F X, and what you are doing now, and we are actually restricting ourselves to quadratic features. We are restricting ourselves to quadratic features for timing. You want, if you want, you can go to uh, you know uh, three cubic features also. It's only depend upon your intuition, but for quadratic feature I am trying to make a case, and it will remain the same for all of them. So here you have x1 x2 xn, then you have x1 square x2 square xn square, and then you will have all cross terms. Everybody agrees with this? This is actually similar to the earlier situation where we had only two samples, two features, x1 and x2. But now we increased it to xn. So we will have a expanded feature space which considers all the quadratic polynomials. So it will be like this. And one thing to note here is the total number of features here in this set will be n. In this set it will be n again, but in this set, since it's a pairwise selection, it will be NC2 because you are selecting two out of the ensemble. So two pairs will be there. So once you do that, it's NC2. So once you calculate the total number of features that you have in expanded feature space, the value comes out to be this. And this we are saying as n prime. Please note I am saying it as n prime right now because as we know n is for features and m is for training examples. So your new features, the new features in the expanded space, I am writing it as n prime, and the value is this. Can anybody tell me what is the drawback of this equation? Any one of you?
Like for a simple number of features, the n prime gives explosive results.
Exclusive results? What you are saying?
Like it increases quite brilliantly.
Yeah, but yeah, you are some way or the other close to what I am trying to say. The thing is, as we are doing basis expansion, this technique is also called as basis expansion because anyhow these are all basis, basis axis on which you are plotting the data. So it's also called as basis expansion. But the problem with this approach is that basis expansion leads to high dimensional feature space. As you can observe here, this value will be very high if your n is very high. It explodes. For example, I will try to show you here fast, but you can see we have this MNIST dataset. This MNIST dataset, if you want to check on website, you can do that. It's a simple representation of zeros and ones, and we have images of 28 cross 28. All these images are of size 28 cross 28. The training size images are 60,000, testing are 10,000, and we have 10 classes. So I will give you an exercise here. We will discuss this in next class because it's already finishing off. I cannot finish this explanation in 2 or 3 minutes. The question is, for this MNIST data set, how can you prove that we are in we are in we are in bad situation if we do basis expansion. If we do basis expansion, why we are in bad situation here if I consider MNIST data set? This is the question for you to think for the next class, and we will discuss this reason why basis expansion is not good for this particular case, and then we can discuss further. So any questions here till today's class? If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, we can end this class today. Any one of you? No questions? Okay, good. So if there are no questions, then we are ending this class today, and the answer to this will be given in your next class. Thank you so much for attending the class.
Thank you, sir.